and welcome to Top of the Funnel, the show where content conversations begin. I'm your host, Natasha Puri, and today we have with us someone who is a writer and a journalist first, and a content marketer second. He has headed content marketing for reputed organizations like ClearTax and Razorpay, and is currently the Assistant General Manager, Content Marketing at Paytm. I'm hoping to learn a lot about content marketing in this finance space, and also about his transition from journalist to marketer in our chat today. Hi Saurin, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Natasha. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you here, and it's kind of nice that because of the lockdown and COVID, at least we're having these conversations, virtually,
Yes.
not in person. So I think this would never have happened had we not been in this situation. So
Yeah, I
it's
guess it.
kind of a good thing, making a good thing out of a bad situation, I guess. Anyway,
That's the
so
best we can do.
yeah. So let's start at the very beginning. Um, Tell us a little bit about your journey so far. What all have you dabbled in, and what are you currently doing at Paytm? So just if you can walk us through a bit of a timeline of your career, that would be great.
So I actually started out as an advertising copywriter, and this was way back in 2004, where I worked with an ad agency in Ahmedabad for I think close to 3 years. And it was then that I, moved into financial journalism with value research. And at that time, I had no clue about personal finance things like mutual funds, tax, or insurance, wealth creation, anything. But I joined as an editor and started to learn on the job. So, and I think that was one of the best decisions I made, because that sort of kickstarted my journey in finance. And since 2007 till now, the past 14 years, close to 15 years, I've been in the finance fintech industry entirely. And from journalism to now to startups, where with ClearTax, Razorpay, small case, and currently at Paytm, where I'm leading the B2B content marketing efforts. And yeah, that's pretty much the journey so far, copywriting journey. But like, happy to have been, as you mentioned earlier, first a writer. So still think of myself as a writer more than a content marketer, and writing has been my first love, so that has helped me in the career so far.
So yeah, I'm very intrigued because I have a journalism background as well. I mean, I studied journalism, but I never became a journalist.
Okay.
And then I also moved on to multiple things as an editor at a publishing house, and as a eventually content marketer now. So that's why I think it's quite interesting that you made that transition. So can you talk a bit more about how being a journalist has impacted your skills as a content marketer? How did it get you here?
I think what helped me as a journalist was it got me the kind of eyeballs that I required. So because of my articles getting published in Value Research and Economic Times and other publications, I was able to build sort of an audience online, on social media profiles like LinkedIn, Twitter primarily, and that helped me transition into content marketing. So in 2016, when I joined ClearTax first, at that time I don't think there was no content marketing. Content writing was pretty much in the nascent stage, where brands were started to understand the importance of ranking and SEO, and using content as a means of creating awareness for the brand and generating leads. So that was very useful. And being a journalism helped me understand that the content that you're putting out has to be top par in terms of quality, because when we create content for our brands, for our blog properties, for our video properties or social media, we are pretty much putting it out there for free. But as a journalist, you're writing or reporting, writing stories for people who have subscribed to you. They are either the physical paper or the online versions, they are paying for what you're writing. So the whatever the stories that you're creating out there have to be something that they don't get anywhere else. So that is the kind of approach that I try to bring into content marketing as well, personally myself, as well as with the team that I work with, to ensure that there are data driven stories. There are every argument that we make is sort of validated through data, or or through our own experiences or the experience of our peers and seniors. So all of these aspects of journalism, and the whole mindset of creating stories out of whatever idea that you have. So that the whole element of storytelling using data, ensuring that every piece of content that you put out is useful to the reader, and they find it important enough to not only consume it themselves but share it across with their networks as well. So that kind of experience of being a journalist has helped great with content marketing.
Those are actually some really, really interesting points that you made. So, can you summarize these points for me? Like three things that, being a journalist, you can use as an advantage when it comes to content marketing? Because you spoke about, factually correct
Yeah.
content, adding value. So, if you can quickly just summarize those three things for me, I think that's a great takeaway.
I think most important thing is to use data as much as you can to validate the arguments that you're making, to build a story around the content that you're creating, and to ensure that this, whatever piece of content you're creating is sort of like an end piece for that particular topic. So your reader should not require to go anywhere else to find out something more about a topic. You can go 2-3 levels deeper into whatever you're creating, writing, so that whatever information the readers, basically you're just trying to answer one question or other that comes in your reader's mind. So using data, using stories, and adding depth to the article.
Yeah, that those are three, I think, really great inputs. So okay, let's fast forward a bit and talk about what a day in the life of Paytm assistant general manager for content marketing looks like. So what does your day look like? How is your work structured?
Sure. So more than a day, like we sort of plan our work in terms of quarters. So we plan for entire quarter, then break them tasks down to months, and then to fortnightly sprints that we have. So or more, so we plan for a longer calendar, and everybody has their own task for the particular sprint that they work on. But personally, if like I also focus a lot on writing myself, so I play the role for the being the senior person. I need to play the role of an editor or the strategist, for the products that we have. But I also spend a lot of time myself writing, because I don't want to sort of lose. I don't want to become rusty. If I believe that if I stop being a good writer, I'll stop being a good editor. So I spend a lot of time, at least 2 days a week I spend on writing as well. Apart from that, the work involves interacting with the product team to understand the product pipelines, interacting with the team to reviewing the articles or the content that they have created, and how we can help them understand how to make it better, give them inputs on what they can add, or what kind of elements they can remove from uh, the individual pieces. Apart from that, we also interact closely with the rest of the marketing team, because we content works across functions in marketing, whether it be the growth marketing team or the performance team, or with the brand marketing team, social teams. So pretty much involved in all kind of activities that happen for the B2B side of Paytm right now, and using, or even PR for that matter. So using content wherever it's required, and trying to stitch all of it together to have a coherent storyline, and a pipeline for the brand.
So, if I can ask you, what does the strategy for content marketing look like at Paytm that you have designed? So, what is your strategy?
So for content marketing, of course the end goal is to generate leads for the brand, to create awareness of the brand and get more users on board and start using the product. So for that, we look at content activities in terms of what is the pipeline for the product. So we speak with the product team, understand what are the features that they're rolling out, or what are the new launches that are happening in the coming quarter, or coming like half of the year, and trying to devise content that revolve around those particular launches, so that we can do justice to the launches. Of course, the product features that rolled out, they have to reach a wider audience, and marketing plays a big role in that. So that's one part of the strategy. Apart from that, we want to make ensure that our content is easily discoverable, so we try to look at high ranking keywords that with the SEO team, and try to devise content for that. At the same time, so I think of something, SEO as reactive and proactive. So reactive SEO is where you look at the high volume keywords, and try to churn out content to rank for those keywords that are already there. But proactive SEO is where you try to stay on top of the trends, or try to figure out what is going to rank next, or what kind of people will look for next, and try to devise content for that, so that you have the first mover advantage for that. So we also we follow the news, we follow whatever RBI is doing because we're in the fintech space. We follow what NPCI is doing in the payment space, and see what kind of changes that they are bringing in, and what kind of content can we work around for that, so that we are answering questions before they come into our readers or our users' minds.
So I'd love to know a bit about the team structure as well.
At a newspaper or at a media house, every reporter has a specific beat that they look after. Similarly, in the content marketing team at Paytm right now, or previously in the different organizations, every writer was assigned to a specific product. So there were some people who are working on, let's say, payment gateway at Paytm. Some who are working on the payouts product. Some people are working on the payment Paytm ads product. So this helps them stay in tune with what are happening with the product, as well as the industry that the product is based in. And they can speak with the product marketers, the product managers, and figure out what kind of content is required to drive higher adoption for the product. So the writing team itself, or the creating team itself, is structured that way. Every person assigned to a separate product. Apart from that, we work closely with the design team, because a lot of content efforts require some design help. So there's a design team is involved with us, and there's the SEO team which we work closely with to not only understand what kind of keywords we want to rank for, but also to understand how our ranking is changing on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis. If you're dropping in ranking for certain keywords where you're ranking, then how can you optimize the existing content to rank for those keywords again? Or if there's some opportunity that we're missing out on that we can spot, so we can create content to tap into those opportunities. So yeah, this is like pretty much how the team is structured. Apart from that, we also work closely with different aspects of marketing, like with the growth team, with the email marketing team, with the brand team, with the performance team.
There is a perception that B2B content can be very boring, right? Very serious, very, uninteresting overall. So my question is, how do you make that, what do you feel about that? And how do you make B2B content, and again in fintech space, right? It's again serious sort of industry. How do you make it interesting? And feel free to give us a few examples of pieces of content that actually generated that kind of interest from your target audience, of course.
Yeah, you're right. Finance is something which people find boring, and something that's easy to procrastinate. It's like, I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do this later on. And there is very rarely there's some kind of urgency from the user to do something with their finances. Like terms of income tax also, we file at the last day. We make our tax saving in March when we have the entire year to do it. So again, but in the B2B fintech space, there's a bit more urgency, because like, let's say with something like a payment gateway, when a business is starting out, its payment gateways are the first things that you require to get operational. So it's not something that they procrastinate, but it's easily something that they'll try to not read up much about, or try to or delegate the responsibility to somebody else. So of course, being a B2B brand, we can't be as flippant as like a B2C brand. We can't use the kind of humor that maybe Zomato uses, or maybe Dunzo uses, or Swiggy uses. But at the same time, I think B2B marketing does not have to be boring. You're eventually still speaking to a human within a business. So there is room for some kind of playing around or experimentation that you can do. And I think the best way to not make your content boring is to use data and to use stories. Everybody likes a good story. So these could be customer stories. These could be stories about the brand itself. These could be stories about how a particular event unfolded. Or whenever you use data is something that everybody likes. So there are always reports that we generate. There are white papers that we do that bring data into the element of the content. So everybody likes to look at data, to see things like how is UPI doing, or how people are using paying credit cards, and stuff like those things. So that kind of use of data and story is very useful to make B2B content less boring. So like, personally, I don't find it boring, but yeah, I can imagine why the audience would sometimes find it too.
Actually, now that you touched upon the pandemic and its impact on content overall. I'd love to know your view, because some people think that this is a bubble that will burst, right? All this content, eventually people will be like, that's it, no more. And of course, some people are a lot more optimistic that this is now an acceptable sort of way of life, and content is getting the focus, the due focus and due importance. So what are your thoughts on it? Do you think, what is that future post pandemic world kind of going to look like in terms of content marketing?
I think content marketing will. You're right in mentioning that it has gotten its due in the past, like let's say 1 year, or previously 1 year before that. But it will continue to play a very important role in marketing, because right now there is no marketing without content. You content plays a role. If you're going to run ads, you need copies for ads. If you want to run email campaigns, you need content for the emails. If you're going to have uh, like blogs, articles, of course we do that. But if you're going to use social media, or if you want to do something on the brand front, and if you want to create a video, you need content there for the script. So content, there's essentially no marketing right now without content. So content will continue to be one of the pillars of marketing going forward as well for brands. But I think in terms of bubble, maybe the bubble will burst in terms of, like, just creating content will not be enough, or just creating subpar content will not be enough. There'll be more focus on creating quality content, or content which is actually useful to the users. So the way I defined is, like, I've sort of created a theory of my own of like every content should have a USP. So this USP is, like, it should be useful, it should be shareable, and it should be productive. So useful in terms of, like, when you come to a piece of content, you are coming with a specific intent to understand or to learn about something. So if it's useful, then it serves that purpose. And if it serves that purpose, it becomes shareable for you. If you find something useful, you share it on your Twitter or your LinkedIn. You share it on your friends, with your friends on WhatsApp or something. So that's where useful and shareable become important for the consumer. And for the brand, the content is to be productive, because it has to fulfill the function that it is set out to fulfill. It could either be creating awareness, or creating an image for the brand, or it could be creating leads for the brand. So as long as your content has that USP of being useful, shareable, and productive, your content will survive. It will be outside that bubble, which might or might not burst.
Okay, are there one or two campaigns that you'd love to talk to us about that you felt were successful campaigns? And of course, define those success metrics for us, because as you know, when it comes to content, defining success, defining ROI is still a big challenge. And, so it would be great if you can break that down.
I think being in the fintech space, one thing, kind of not a campaign, but an event that we have always worked across. And I worked on being at Value Research or ET, ClearTax, Small Case Razorpay, Paytm, everywhere, has been the budget. In the economic space, the budget is the pivotal event of the year. So, and it gets a lot of eyeballs. It gets a lot of attention from the media, from the brands itself, because there's always something which affects some or the other industry in the budget. So we have created always, every year, irrespective of where I've been, I've created content around the budget, of course, with the help of the team that I've worked with. And that has always got a lot of ROI for us. So it is, how we measure success there has been, sometimes in terms of the kind of traffic we got for our landing pages or our articles, or it has been in terms of the kind of PR attention we got out of the media, from the media, out of the budget kind of stories we created, or it has also been in terms of the signups that we got. So budget has always been sort of an event that we look forward to, because it gives, I personally like to watch the budget very closely myself, because it gives a good indication of where the country is heading, where the economy is heading, and what you can expect from the coming year. Apart from that, it also gives, as a content creator or content marketer, it gives you the opportunity to speak to your audience in sort of for something that they probably don't understand but wish to understand. If I am an e-commerce merchant, for example, and I wish to understand what the impact of the budget is for me, but I might not have the kind of knowledge or kind of understanding to figure that out myself. So as a content creator, you can step in and like break down the budget for different industries or different sectors. So that's something that has always been very useful in our efforts. And usually we see that February is when the budget comes, and February is when we see a spike in traffic or in signups because of the budgets activities that we do.
How much of distribution and promotion of the content do you kind of plan for ahead of, when you are planning the content? Is that part of your strategy, or does that come later?
No, distribution plays as important a part as creation. I think like now or going forward, the brands that will win at content marketing will be the brands that focus on distribution, because content creation has sort of become easy, or people know how to do a fairly good job at it, and everybody is creating content. But how do you ensure that the content that you're creating is actually reaching your audience? So distribution, like at Paytm also, we I would say close to 50% of efforts that you put into creating, we put into distribution as well, and that's continued to play a very big role. So this could happen through social media, through newsletters, through emails. It could happen through you're turning one piece of content into different forms. Like there's a very good article that could be a video, that could be an infographic. So there are multiple ways to like content is created once, but it can be distributed in multiple formats. So I think that is going to be the deal winner or deal breaker for brands going forward.
So I think that's my final question to you. Two things that excite you the most about being a content marketer, and two biggest challenges.
Two things that excite me most. I think first thing, personally, I like to write a lot, and writing has been my first love. So I'm very fortunate to be able to, you say there's an old adage that love, do what you love, and you'll never work for a single day. So I'm actually been fortunate to have a career in writing, and people pay me for writing, and I can't think of anything like more of a dream job than that. So that is one thing that excites me a lot about being into content marketing, because I like to write and create content. Apart from that, it's very exciting because content now plays a very important role in user acquisition. So it's just not limited to creating content or just writing articles. We have to think deeper into how content is becoming useful for the brand, and how it is playing a big role in what the brand wants to achieve. So those are the two things that are very exciting from a content marketing front. In terms of challenging, I think we are in this show called Top of the Funnel, but one of the challenges remains is to improve the funnel after it goes from the top. So typically for us, the funnel would be like we have a user, reader, or consumer who signs up and then starts transacting and using the product. So one of the challenges to improve the funnel after the user has signed up, or after the user has come on your website. So that is a channel we want to make a lot of more efforts to get more of the readers to sign up and more of the signups to start transacting and start using the products. So that's one challenge. And I think other challenge would be in terms of hiring. It's always a struggle to hire a good content team, and i've I've thought a lot about it, and there's no specific way that I can say that this is a way, a scientific way to approach hiring for content. It's still largely hits and misses.
Thanks again, Saurin, for making time to do this, to have this conversation. I
More than
know that
happy.
these are small stepping stones, in this whole huge journey we have to make content marketing even more mainstream and relevant in India. So every conversation, I think, counts. So thank you so much for doing this.
More than welcome. Thank you.